Hi, welcome to your next tech startup. Today I have on Jossie Haines, who is someone that I wanted to be on one of my very first episodes when I thought about starting this podcast. She is a longtime VP of engineering and now is a executive coach for engineering leadership. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am an executive coach. I work with engineering leaders and technology leaders through high stakes transitions. So, starting a new job and making sure you thrive in your first 90 days. It actually turns out that, especially at like the higher levels, I think it's something like 30 to 40% of folks don't last past like a year or a year and a half because they're
Which is
not set up
crazy.
for success. Right. Like it's
Yeah.
it's insane. And it's also, it's not just first 90 days. It's maybe you were reorged and you're trying to deal with a
Mm.
transition. Maybe like your boss changed and things feel really hard now.
Hmm.
It's you, or you want to get promoted and you're feeling stuck at like some sort of career cap level. Or
Hmm.
maybe you actually want to like do something else entirely and want a thought partner. I also work with
Mm.
a number of like first time founders or helping people through career pivots, right? So it's really like you're trying something new and you really would need the support so that you can make the impact you desire.
Yeah, and one thing I have heard from leaders is that leadership can be lonely,
Oh, yes.
and I think that's where executive coaching and being able to be honest and sharing things with someone who's you know had very similar problems during their career is such an amazing experience. And today, because we talk about hiring on the podcast, we are going to talk about things that you have coached candidates or coached your clients on who were at the time job searching or at least
Hmm.
ended up landing a new role, and and some of the things that maybe people don't think about when they're thinking
Yes.
about their job search. And this is specific to engineering leadership, although probably some of it can apply to anybody who's in engineering and in their job
Hmm.
search. So you have a few different examples. So the first one we're going to start with is a resume one. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So this is about resumes and LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes like I ran a workshop. I teach people how to like update their resume and LinkedIn. And one of the women who attended, she'd been struggling to get like recruiters to reach out to her. She literally
Mm-hmm.
texted me the Monday. The workshop was on Friday. She did the work over the weekend. She texted me on Monday and was like, oh my gosh, people are now reaching out, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like we get really in our heads around how to write a resume,
Mm.
and but the job description is gold when you're trying to write something here. And so what I have people do is literally copy and paste the bullets out of the resume in one column. In the middle column, like brain
Mm-hmm.
dump like their experience. And then in the last column, use Google's like XYZ impact formula to write their stories, but using the language in the first column that's in the job description, because
Huh.
that's a psychology trick. We actually subconsciously resonate with the language that we use. And so having the language that you're using match what's the language in the job description ends up being key for that. So that's one way to think about, instead of getting into your head, like, and you can have AI help you with this too.
Yeah.
And so it can, this isn't about having it sound like insanely polished. It's actually about like, how do you pattern match as closely as possible? And then there's the psychology part of it too.
I have also heard on the kind of like using AI to like improve resumes is that, and I'm always using it as a recruiter to like analyze a candidate and their fit to a job
Mm-hmm.
description. That someone recommended candidates need to do that instead of, hey, here's my resume. How can I improve my resume? That it's, hey, I'm the hiring manager. Is this person worth having a call with? And that then the
Absolutely.
AI actually gives you better feedback, like more honest
Mm-hmm.
feedback instead of, I guess, I guess AI sometimes will give you like, oh, this is great about you and this is great. Like, so, okay. So your second tip is on networking.
Yes. And hey, engineers a lot are often introverts, right? Networking is one of those things that feels like pulling teeth. And yet I tell people very lovingly that if all that you're doing is applying to jobs,
Mm-hmm.
that you're basically sending your resume to DevNull, and like there's actually a pretty low chance, and networking can really be a game changer with it. And
Yeah. Especially for director and VP levels, because a lot of
yes.
those roles, they won't be posted. The other one is the number of leadership people who have said nobody good applies to a director of engineering role, like, or just a director role. Like, it's this silly belief. I've made great hires because I do actually look at applicants. But it is very hard at that level to use the job application process.
Oh, absolutely. Especially now when you're getting flooded with like hundreds of resumes in the first
Yeah.
24 hours. And so I was working with a coaching client. She wanted like a head of engineering type role.
Mm.
And I said, hey, network with your old coworkers. Like start
Yes.
there. Because even if they don't have roles, what is actually a fact is like it's actually our second degree connections that are more likely to find us a job than our first
Mm.
degree connections. And so, but she's like, I don't know what to say to my old coworkers. It's been a while since I talked to them.
Mm.
And it's not about treating networking. Every, I always say people love talking about themselves, right? So reach out, like make it a relationship, connect with them, right? Just say like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I want to learn more about what you're doing these days, right? People are willing to
Mm-hmm.
hop on a call with you. The other trick that has worked with so many of the leaders that I work with related to networking is I think when we try to plan our networking and execute the outreach at the same time, like our brains start shutting it down. So I always tell
Huh.
people separate the planning part, like sit down for 30 minutes. Like let's say you're doing networking like once a week, right? For an hour if
Okay.
somebody's like in a job, right? As like the first hour of the month, like do your plan for the rest of the month of like who you're going to reach out to and generally like what you're going to say. And then like spend the rest of the time buckets you have doing the executing piece because our brain like we'll literally start getting in our heads about like, oh, should I really reach out to them and all this stuff. Like, and so if you've done all the planning up front, it actually like then
Mm-hmm.
helps limit that when you go into the actual
So
executing
you're
piece.
writing the message
And who
on
you're going to reach out to in the first time.
on
Yeah.
one time, and then the actual sending the messages happens on a different day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I find that that breaks that resistance piece. Like, and I've seen this pattern like over and over again, and especially for engineers that struggle with networking, that's been a huge unlock.
One that like an, I had talked to someone about was like saying, hey, I'm interviewing right now and I'm trying to remember more details on that project that we worked on together. Would you be up for like a 15-minute chat?
Yep.
And then you're letting them know you're considering new opportunities, you're connecting with them, you're reminiscing on like experience working with them. And
Hmm.
like, who knows? And at the very least, you just get to connect with somebody that you like. So
And they'll keep you in mind. And she actually, like, this person actually landed her head of engineering role through, like, one of the people she networked with. And I think the other thing is,
so
I think
okay, and so
people
to
think they
clarify,
need,
because
yeah.
you said second connection. So she reached out to someone to have like a let's reconnect conversation, had that conversation, and was that person's company hiring or was it
So
somebody?
that person said, oh, you should talk to this other person we used to work with.
Okay.
And that other person was actually CEO of a company and happened to be hiring. It was not, as you said, the role actually hadn't been published. And she was, the timing just ended up working out properly, right? And it was just, and I think the other thing is people think about this and they get overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I need to network with like hundreds of people. I think in total, she ended up reaching out to like maybe 20 people at most, right? So, and again, we can't guarantee that like you're going to get something in small numbers, but
Yeah.
I've seen lots of
But 20
people
is a
try
lot.
this with like, but she was doing like 4 or 5 a week, right? And
Okay.
like getting on calls and things like that, right? Because like once you're in the pattern, like you can do 4 or 5 a week, like over a month, you can do like 20. I think it took her like a month and a half to do 20. And you you can make it not overwhelming, right? I think that's the
Yeah.
point. I think people think like, oh my gosh, I must reach out to a million people to get a job in this
Mm.
market.
Yeah. And the other thing, like I remember talking to people about with the like the networking and talking to old colleagues is interviewing is exhausting. You're dealing with rejection. You're dealing with like these people who don't know you and you're trying to tell your story. And I think mixing that experience, especially if someone's not working at the moment, being able to
Yes.
mix that experience with having conversations with people who have worked with you, do appreciate you, do understand all the great things about you, that it like brings some sanity. So yes, like you're
Hmm.
saying, like the actual act of doing the networking feels like overwhelming, but like being able to connect with people who do know you is such a healthy thing to do when you're going through the interview process and all of the pain points of that.
Absolutely. And to add to that, if it's somebody that you trust, that you had like a good relationship with,
Mm-hmm.
a great question to ask them is, what did you think my superpower was? Or what did you think like my greatest strengths were? Because first, they're going to see things that you potentially dismissed.
Right.
And what they're saying is great interview stories for you as well.
That's a great one. Okay. And now the third interview tip that well,
Yes.
third one is an interview tip.
Yes. So this one is for system design or coding type interviews, right? So
Mm-hmm.
engineers, engineering leaders tend to get these. And one of my coaching clients, engineering manager for a while, hadn't coded in a bit. We were working
Yeah.
on prepping her for system design interviews and or coding interviews. And she kept struggling on the technical interview, and we were talking about the strategy she was using, and she said, well, when they ask me what language I want to use, she would always pick whatever the company was using because she thought that that would make her look good. But even though her strongest language was Java, she wouldn't default to that. And I said, no, no, no. Like, default to the language that, like, you can actually show technical competence in. And in
Yeah.
fact, that's what she did. She did that in the next interview. And because part of it was working through the mindset, because like she literally had a block that was like, they will think I'm not competent because I didn't pick the language that they code in.
Uh,
And I was like, no. And so part of it was really just like the mindset shift of like, hey, at least try it once. And she was like, oh my gosh, it went great. And they were happy, right?
yeah. Well,
And
and the thing with like those interviews is like your brain is probably functioning at what, like 50%.
yeah,
You're not going to be your regular brilliant self in an interview, at least most of us aren't. And so you're already down 50%. Then you take a language that you're not super comfortable and confident in. And like you're just like you're demonstrating like 10 to 20% of like what you're actually capable of. I've heard so many times of this story of the candidate, they chose the language, they chose to do that language. And I was just like, what? Why? Like, because I talked to the candidate, I had said, you can do the language of your choice. and then they, yeah, would do a language that wasn't their strong language and they fail.
And I think this one specifically is one of these things that it's like, because then the option is like, oh, I spent all this time cramming in this language that's going to take you hours potentially, versus just being like, no, I'm going to pick the language I'm strong at, right? And so this is where we try to do like the hard thing sometimes, and actually it's the easier thing that it will actually make us look better.
Yeah. So when they're preparing for like a systems design interview, go with the language that you're comfortable in. Is there like kind of, instead of spending that time cramming for this language that they're not as comfortable in, is there something that how they would better be using their time?
So if it's specifically system design interviews, I've actually
I
been
guess that's
sending
not language.
everybody to hellointerview.com. It's this like
Okay.
AI assisted tool where you can actually role play system design interviews. And they actually have non-system design interviews too. They have coding ones on there as well. But it works really well for practicing like the structure of how to do a system design interview. Some of the other thing I recommend people, and it just depends on your learning style, like some of my coaching clients like love the AI because it's like interactive, it's like it gives you feedback. There's also the system design interview books 1 and 2 by Alex Zhu and San Lam. They're former colleagues of mine. I helped write one of the chapters in the second book, but they're also amazing books, and they have a YouTube channel where they actually showcase a bunch of these things. So I tell people like,
Oh, cool.
watch how these are done. Yeah, the YouTube channel is called Bite Bite Go. Watch how other people are doing these, because often, like, part of knowing how to do a system design interview is knowing how to do a system design interview properly, and when to ask the right questions, when to break it down, when to do the analysis, like
Yeah.
trying to get to an answer and not like the perfect answer up front,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so I tell people, instead of like spending this time like cramming, trying to figure out languages, the other thing with system design interviews also that I think overwhelms people, even if you end up not having to write any explicit code, is just like, oh my God, there's so many different types of system design interview problems. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to memorize like every single type of
Yeah.
problem. So it's really about learning the meta concept of like, how do you break down an architecture and figure out how to implement it. And also give yourself some grace, because guess what? Some of these questions are not really set up for success with the candidate. Like, it's one of these things where I've helped coach like teams hiring on like, that interview question is very targeted to like, if that person specifically knew that
Yeah.
specific thing, and you're not actually testing their ability to architect something. But that's a whole
Yeah.
other
And
conversation.
yeah, I mean, and that's such a hard one because you need to kind of standardize your interview process. And there are some candidates that's like, oh, they've already solved it. So like they get to the point faster. But I like the idea of, instead of cramming for interviews, actually watching other people talk through the interviews.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably such like a more effective way. And it amazes me how many people don't ask enough questions in the beginning. And like, I have never been in a systems design interview, but I have read and listened to so much feedback on systems design interviews that like, do not ever start with going towards a solution. You always have to be asking questions in the beginning, and like, and treat it like there is, I mean, in my opinion, like a systems design interview should not have one correct right answer.
Right.
And like, and so treat it like that, like, and engage. It's also, it is a culture interview. And so you should be engaging with the interviewer and kind of going through a process of getting to a solution together.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, these were three really great tips that I think, apply probably to really anyone who's job searching. As I told you, like I do a lot of like just hired episodes where I interview engineers who've just been hired. And so these are all like great examples of people that you've worked with who have just been hired into engineering leadership. So thank you so much for sharing those stories with us.
Yes, happy to help.
Yes, and obviously, if people are looking for additional support, I will have Josie's info in the show notes.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.